Till now, we have been talking about food as being an important source of energy for all the living organism. But this food flows in a cyclic manner throughout the ecosystem of an organism. But the food must be manufactured by certain organisms in order to circulate. And these foods is cleverly manufactured by some organisms which we have termed as autotrophs. And these autotrophs, as you might guess, are all the organisms which might are able to synthesize their own foods and primarily includes all the plants, and surprisingly it also includes some blue green, or we can say bacterial species, blue green algae as well, living algae or some bacteria which are having the power to synthesize their own food. But the process in which these whole organisms are able to synthesize their own food is what we term as photosynthesis. And photosynthesis is a process in which organisms or specific organisms are able to convert inorganic substances into organic substances, that is your food. But what is this inorganic substances which we are talking about? These inorganic substances are essentially water or gases like CO2 or oxygen, which are quite necessary for photosynthesis as well. And as you're going to say, it's getting converted into organic substances. Organic substances include the food, okay? And you can see that different organisms have different food sources which are manufactured by them. But in general, we will be talking about the photosynthesis which is seen in plants. But plants are quite necessary for living organisms for survival. It gives us the oxygen which is necessary for respirations. It also, in its main function, is giving us our pricely food which we all need. But how does the photosynthesis is happening in a plant? But with general, let's start off with drawing a diagram of showing a basic cross section of a plant and all the mechanisms which are associated it. So first, this is the stem which I'm trying to draw. Along with the stem, you also have this branches of a plant, okay? And obviously, this is the soil and a big, large leaf, okay? And the peculiar green color which I have shown here is like a characteristic features of any plant. We associate plants of being green in color, but these green colors is quite vital for the process of photosynthesis. But let's study first in detail. Any forms of plant that you have seen requires, as I've told, water and CO2 along with a key ingredient called as the solar energy. Solar energy for the process of photosynthesis. Now, all these raw materials are gathered by the plants through its surrounding itself. So, first, water comes up through all the transportatory systems up through the from the roots to the plant. Okay, from we can see here the blue line here represents the flow of water. Okay, and second, carbon dioxide is taken inside the leaf or leaf plant, or plant organism's body through the stomatas, which is present in the lower surfaces of the leaf. The stomata are quite necessary because helps in exchange of gases which are quite necessary for the process of photosynthesis. But this CO2, along with water, is not just sufficient for the flow of energy of transforming this inorganic substance into organic compounds. It do requires the solar energy, and this solar energy is obviously provided by the sun, which is the best source of solar energy for us. Now, this solar energy might be a quite interesting factor for us to know how this solar energy is utilized by the green plants which is present over here. The solar energy is captured by a special cell organelle which is called as the chloroplast present in each cell of a leaf. Okay, but peculiarly it's saturated in the leaf margins because in leaf itself, because leaf is the plant which is in the aerial, and second it is receiving plenty of sunlight throughout its life. Now, Chloroplast is a cell organelle, which is primarily contain a special pigment which we all know as the chlorophyll. Okay, and this pigment of chlorophyll, I will have a special underline. It's called just the pigment, which is capturing the solar energy by the sun and help as a energy supply for the process of photosynthesis. Now, over here, I have a diagram in which it's a general structure of a leaf in which you can see various cells which are kept over here. Like you can see this cell, and which is having countless of these green structures, right? These green structures are essentially the chloroplast. These are the chloroplasts which are present. Chloroplast. And these chloroplasts are containing the pigment chlorophyll, which gives this characteristic green color. Okay, and this chlorophyll pigment, as I have told, helps in absorbing the solar energy and helps in converting this water CO2 into a very valuable substance for plants, which is the food source. And plants produce this food in the forms of glucose. Glucose. Okay, glucose is essentially a simple sugar which is synthesized by the plants as a product of the photosynthesis reactions. But let's just try to comprehend this photosynthesis reaction in the form of a reaction. Let's say photosynthesis is overall written in the forms as I've told. Raw materials are the molecules of CO2 as in the forms of gases, and I have purposely wrote this 6 over here is representing the definite quantity of CO2 in the form of gas required by the plant. But this CO2 will obviously go ahead combine with 12 molecules of water in the presence of obviously sunlight. As we have shown here, this chlorophyll pigment absorbs or traps this solar energy. And if I'm saying about chlorophyll, if I'm talking about sunlight, there should always be chlorophyll which is associated in there. So in the presence of solar energy and chlorophyll, the 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and 12 molecules of water are converted into a price-full product, which is the glucose. Glucose is structural formula of glucose is C6H12O6. And as you can observe, this molecule is quite large. The 6 carbon dioxide molecules are getting converted into a molecule of glucose. But this is not done. The glucose molecule which is produced is also accompanied by 6 molecules of water and 6 molecules of oxygen. And this oxygen is essentially released out through the stomatas and are necessary for all our living organisms to consume it in the process of respirations. So, photosynthesis in general has transformed away this CO2 into a glucose molecule, where glucose is essentially a carbon and hydrogen molecule. Okay, you can see here the main structure atoms which are present in glucose molecules are only carbon and hydrogen along with the oxygen. Fine. Now, this process of photosynthesis is quite astonishing for us and is generally having a fixed mechanism. As I've told, the first thing any plant will try to perform during photosynthesis is the absorption of the solar energy. Absorption of solar energy. This solar energy is absorbed by the chlorophyll pigment, which is present in the chloroplast inside the each and individual cells, particularly in the leaf. Okay, and this solar energy is converted into whole sorts of ways into chemical energy. Okay, now these chemical energy is nothing but the splitting of this water molecule into respective hydrogen and oxygen atoms, or sorry, molecules. Okay, which leads us to the second step of photosynthesis, which is essentially the conversion of these solar energy into a chemical energy, solar to a chemical energy, Now, how would this solar energy be converted into chemical energy? By the splitting of water molecule. Now, the splitting of water molecule is quite interesting process, because when you split a water molecule, it will at the same time release tremendous amounts of energy, which will fuel this whole reaction, and that last lead to the formation of glucose. This is by the splitting of water molecule into hydrogen and oxygen. Okay. Now, after splitting of water into hydrogen and oxygen, you have tremendous amounts of energy, but this energy is utilized in a fruitful work by conversion of essentially the CO2 into the glucose molecule. Now, which leads us this to the third step of photosynthesis, which is the conversion of the CO2 molecule into a glucose molecule. CO2 molecule into a glucose molecule. Now, how would this be converted? So, we have studied about the reduction processes which is happening, or the removal of oxygen from a particular compound. Now, basically the CO2, which is present in six quantities, by the action of hydrogen and oxygen, they would remove away, or we can say strip away, those oxygen atoms from the carbon molecules, and would result in the formation of glucose molecules C6H12O6, which would again, in a very complicated processes, would add tons and tons of hydrogen and oxygen and forming a glucose molecule. Okay, so the conversion of carbon molecule into glucose molecule is achieved by simply the reduction of the carbon dioxide molecule. This reduction of a carbon dioxide molecule is nothing but removal of oxygen. Okay, so for isolating the carbon which is present in CO2, you are reducing the carbon dioxide to form the glucose molecule. Removal of oxygen, or simply reduction processes. Okay, reduction of CO2 into the glucose molecule. This is the third step of production, and at last you are reaching up with the price for glucose molecule. These three processes which I have discussed are together constituting the mechanisms of photosynthesis, or we can group them in the mechanisms of photosynthesis. Okay, so these are the basic introduction of basic processes which are happening in a highly complicated biological process of photosynthesis. There is, as I've told, it's quite complex. You have lots of enzymes involved, but I hope the basic concept of how the reaction proceeds is quite clear. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you.